Friday. I'm pretty glad it's Friday. I don't know, this week especially, I mean, you even had a class, a day and a half of classes canceled, and it still feels like this week has been very tiring. I don't know, maybe it's because of the weather. I have no idea, but I'm glad it's Friday, and I don't really plan on taking things too hard today in class. I'm hoping we can just take it easy and get through what we need to get through. So we'll see how it goes. I have nothing to return to you today because I didn't collect anything last time. I don't think there was anything for me to collect last time, for that matter. But you do have a handout for me today, and I do plan to collect this. It's on the 2-7 chord, as we talked about that at length last class. And there's some analysis near the top. There's some more analysis in the middle, which was actually quite quick. And then there's a little bit of part writing on the, I guess, was it the back side for you guys? I think it was. So, as I usually do, let's go ahead and see if you have any questions about any section or any part of this handout before I collect it. And then maybe also I can play some of these examples for you so you can hear them. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
The fourth one, I just measure the second.
Okay, yeah. So we don't really have a lot to go on here. The second Roman numeral in the fifth measure, it has a B flat in the bass. Then it has G, it has B flat, and then up above it's kind of got an F and it has a G. And any way you look at that, it doesn't appear to be a complete chord, no matter how you rearrange the notes. I guess what you could do is, because we're in the key of F, you could say, well, actually all of these notes here, the B flat, the G, and the F, they can fit into a 2-7 chord in the key of F, right? It's just missing the D. So in other words, you could think of the chord as G, B flat, and then the D is missing, and then the F, which would be a minor 7th chord, which is the right type for 2-7 in a major key. So if that were the case, and you included all the notes in your analysis right on that beat, does anyone know what you would get in terms of a Roman numeral? Yeah, I would say a 2-6-5 could be possible as an analysis for that beat. Now, if you consider the F a non-chord tone, like if you consider it a passing tone, which I can understand you can consider it a passing tone because it doesn't really resolve or go down by step in the next measure in that voice. So it's not really behaving like a 7th to a 7th chord, as a 7th chord should. So if you were to discount the F, then all you would have would be G and B flat. And again, you didn't really have little to go on. You could maybe think of it as this kind of chord with no fifth. And in this case, if you don't have a 7th, and you think of it as a triad in first inversion, I would also accept this as an analysis for that big chord. I think either of those would make sense, especially because the chord in the next measure is a dominant chord. In other words, the first chord in measure 6, I have a 5-7 inversion. I have a 5 of some kind. And we talked last class about how 2 chords love to go to 5 chords. Because 2 chords and 2-7 chords both are predominant in function. So they love to go to a dominant function. So I think for that one that you asked about, I would accept either 2-6-5 or 2-6. I think those make the most sense to me. The fact that you have the E and the G, the G and the B flat there. It's not much to go on, but it does make functional sense in the selection. So, yeah, sometimes in real actual music, it's not quite perfect. It's not quite textbook, and sometimes composers will leave out a pitch here and there for various reasons. They have their own reasons. Sometimes to avoid part writing errors. Sometimes because they want a line to go a certain way. and they need this particular pitch in a certain line, so they're gonna avoid another pitch that might fill out the chord, things like that, so. Does anyone have any, another question or other questions about this? Can I, I'll go to the piano, can I play the top example first? The handle example? Kind of a nice sounding, easy listening, easy going example in the key of F major. Oh, sorry. I particularly like the chord that Kelsey asked about. I mean, it doesn't have all the pitches there, but. And then where does it go to? What do you have for that chord, by the way, you guys?
5, 4, 2.
Yes. You hear the tendency in the seventh? That once and 5, 4, 2 has to go where?
1, 6.
To 1, 6. Okay, oh, I shouldn't leave the piano. You guys got another one. By the way, for the Bach example, I don't know if it was clear, but I just wanted like one Roman numeral for each of those big honking blanks. This is just the beginning to the first prelude from the first block of Bach's Whole-Tempered Clavier. Some of you may have heard this. Have you ever heard that one? That's pretty common. And did you all find chords to part right to come from and go to the part rating? Notice the very last one. I wanted, did I say that I wanted a well-formed progression? Right, so that means you need this tonic, predominant, dominant, functioning chord. Okay. If there's nothing else, make sure your name is on it somewhere. Or else I'm gonna forget. Oh, look at that, I even gave you a place for your names. I must have been on the ball when I made this hand. Thank you. Good. There's really not too much else to say about 2/7 chords. The only other thing that I'm going to say about 2/7 chords to finish them up is that I don't know if this was really clear last time, because I don't know if I had a chance to give you an example that does this exactly, but we talked about how the 2/7 chord likes to go over a dominant functioning chord, and let's just use the key of C major as an example, and we'll even just use a root position, 2/7. But remember I said it's in addition to going directly to 5, what was the other, what's another dominant functioning chord or pair of chords you can go to?
7, number 5, number 6.
Okay, and then what was another one even besides just 5 directly?
1, 6, 4, and 5.
Okay, yeah, the 1, 6, 4 to 5. Okay, let's go ahead and put one up here. How about C here, F here, A here? So you know that last class I tried to make a big point about saying there's only one tendency tone in the 2/7 chord. And that's true. That's the 7th of the chord. In this key, D is the root, F is the 3rd, A is the 5th, and C is the 7th. And I said that, you know, the chord 7th of any 7th chord needs to go down by step, right? Well, when 2/7 goes directly to 5, the 7th of the chord can go down by step immediately, right away. But when the 2/7 chord goes to or what's called a 1/6/4 chord before the 5, you're going to find out that the 7th of the 2/7 chord can't really go down by step right away. But it will eventually go down by step. For example, no, change that. Who can tell me in the key of, I'm even doing it right here. Who can tell me in the key of C major, what are the notes of a 1 chord in 2nd chord? Okay.
C, E, G, but with G on the bottom.
Okay, C, E, G with G in the bass, right? So I'm going to have a G in the bass, and we know we're supposed to double the bass of all 1/6/4 chords, all 6/4 triads. And so you'll notice that, you see how there's a C in the 2/7 chord? Don't I need a C in my cadential 6/4? Yeah. So, in other words, the 7th of this 7th chord, it can't go down by step right away, immediately, like it would if I was going to the 5 right away. What it does is it just kind of hangs out, it kind of lingers there, it doesn't move. But then when the 1/6/4 moves to 5, you'll see that this note eventually does go down by step. You see that? So I don't want you to be alarmed, I guess I should say, if your part writing and your 2/7 goes to a 1/6/4 and you're like, oh, I thought the 7th of the chord had to go down by step. Well, it does. But when you go to 1/6/4 before 5, you just kind of have to be patient. It's going to linger there on the same note for a while, but then it'll eventually go down when it gets to the 5 chord. Okay? So I don't want you to be freaked out about that. Sometimes 7th chords, they kind of hang out or linger depending on what the next chord is, but eventually in the same voice, they will go down by step. The one thing I want you to avoid is, I always want you to avoid taking the 7th of the 7th chord up. It never goes up. Okay. So, that probably I didn't make clear last class because I ran out of time and I didn't use this example yet, but once in a while, it's okay if the 7th just stays static for a moment into the next chord or something. It'll eventually go down by step. And that's all that matters. Okay. Any questions about that? All right. Well then today, for the rest of the class that is, I want to move away from 2/7 chords and I want to talk about the 3rd most common type of 7th chord. I think I had given you a little diagram or talked about this quickly last class. Of all the 7th chords, the 5/7 is the most frequently encountered. Then next in frequency is the 2/7. And then 3rd in frequency, and this is the last 7th chord we're going to discuss in detail, is the 7/7. So, I understand, 7s kind of go wild with this one. It's a 7th chord that's built on, whose root is the 7th degree of a scale. So try not to get your 7s mixed up because there's a lot of 7s happening here. So this is the one I want to focus on today. In fact, I want to focus on it not only today, but I want to take a little bit of class time on Monday, it looks like, to finish up, because there's a little more information involved with these than there is with the 2/7 chord. Okay. We had just finished talking about how the dominant functioning chords in that function chart or diagram, I'm just going to abbreviate it, dominant. We have the 5, the 5, 7. We have the 1, 6, 4 to 5. But we also have the 7 diminished 6, correct? Well, like the triad, this is just a triad on scale degree 7 in first division. Like the triad, the leading tone triad, the 7th chord that's built on the leading tone also has dominant function. So a 7 triad has dominant function, so does the 7th chord on the 7th scale degree. They all have dominant function. But we need to remember that the dominant function of the 7 triad and the 7, 7 is still weaker than this chord's dominant function. This is the strongest dominant of all, obviously, because it is the dominant. It is the dominant. So let me put a couple scales out like I did last time for the 2/7 chord and show you where this chord comes from. I'll just use the treble staff. F, G, A, B, and C. And then let's do C harmonic minor. D, E, F, G, A, E natural, and C. So we have C major here. And let's build the 7th chord on scale degree 7. Just using the notes of the C major triad. To see what kind of 7th chord we get. Well, B, D, F, A. Who can tell me which of the 5 types of 7th chords B, D, F, A? Is it major, 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 minor, minor, minor? What kind is it? Diminished minor. So, another way of saying that is this 7th chord on scale degree 7 is half diminished. Half diminished. However you want to write it in notation. And so the 7th chord on scale degree 7, the Roman numeral in major keys will always look like this. Does that make sense? Because I just used the notes of the C major scale and I stacked them in thirds above scale degree 7 and I got B, D, F, A. That turns out to be a half diminished 7th chord. So the diatonic 7th chord on scale degree 7, or whose root is scale degree 7, will always be half diminished in major keys. In major keys there. Now, taking into account the key signature, I'm in C harmonic minor here. Let's build a 7th chord on scale degree 7 in this mode. B, D, F, and because of the key signature, that's A flat. What type of 7th chord is this? Fully diminished 7th chord. It's a diminished triad, B, D, F, with a diminished 7th. B up to A flat is a diminished 7th. So you could look at it as one of these, or you can just use the open circle of the 7. That means the fully diminished 7th type. And so in minor keys, the 7th chord, Roman numeral, the 7th, oh boy, there's so many. The 7th chord on scale degree 7 will always be this one. 7, open circle, 7. Major keys, minor keys. Those are the standard diatonic 7th chord types built on scale degree 7. So that you can kind of see where they come from and how we get those particular types. It's nice to know these. I don't think I officially have them memorized. Then in major you get the 7 half diminished 7, and in minor you get the 7 fully diminished 7. But it certainly is nice to know that. It certainly is nice to kind of have that not too far away that you can access that in your brain. Okay? And all these chords right here, they all possess dominant function. Albeit weak dominant function, but they do possess dominant function. Another thing we need to know is, and you don't need to remember the reason, but when we use the triad on scale degree 7, we're only supposed to use that triad in first inversion. We're not supposed to use it in root position, and we're not supposed to use it in second inversion. Only first inversion. Diminished triads, they only have consonant notes or consonant intervals above the bass when they're in first inversion. Okay? Unlike the triad, these seventh chords on scale degree 7 can be used in any bass position. Any bass position is allowed. So that means then that we can see root position, we can see these chords in first inversion, we can see these chords in second inversion, and we can see these chords frequently in third inversion. All the bass positions, all inversions are usable when you have a seventh chord on scale degree 7. Okay. Now, I want to state something that might be obvious to you, but I want to make a big point because if it's not obvious to you and if it's overlooked, you're going to miss entirely probably how to spell these words correctly. Did you see in each of these cases here that I built, the 7/7 chord is built on the leading tone? Okay. Another phrase, or another term I always refer to the leading tone as is I call it T. The same is true in minor keys as well, because you see how I use the harmonic minor? So I have to raise scale degree 7 with an accidental, and that puts scale degree 7 only a half step below Do. So this is also the leading tone as well, the root of the chord. Or you could call it T. So both in major and minor keys, the leading tone will always be the root, or T is always the root of the chord. And I need to stress that T, no matter whether a major or minor, T is always a half step below. It's always a half step below Do, or the tonic pitch. And these chords are also called leading tone seventh chords, because the root is always the leading tone of the scalar key. Okay. So sometimes when we spell these, for instance, when we spell these chords in minor, what are we going to have to do to the root of these chords when we spell them in minor in order for the root to be truly a leading tone and not te or a subtonic? We have to raise it with an accidental. That's right. Just like we have to raise the leading tone when it appears in a 5 or a 5/7 chord with an accidental in minor. Well, now we got to raise the root of these chords with an accidental when we spell them in minor. All right. I'm going to erase this so I can make some space for some spelling examples. If you were asked to spell that requested chord in the key of D major, and you had a key signature, you would not have to use any accidentals on the chord at all. You would know that the root of the chord in this key is what? What note?
C.
C
Sharp.
sharp, that's right. But if you have a key signature The root of the chord is always already going to be raised. It will already be T, or the leading tone, so to speak. And so all you would have to do is just go to chord. What if, though, and I believe this is the way your homework does it, what if you were not given a key signature and you were told to use accidentals to spell the chord correctly? Well, then you would have to put an accidental on the root, because the root of the chord is always T, a half step below Do. C sharp, E, G, B, as it stands, is that a half diminished seventh chord? The answer is yes. It is half diminished. The triad C sharp, E, G is diminished. The seventh, C sharp up to B natural, is a minor seventh. Diminished minor seventh. Let me do it over here. I don't want you guys to be confused or lost about how to spell the half diminished and the fully diminished seventh chord. Right? So for instance, the half diminished one, C, E, G, B, if it helps you again to look at the construction of the intervals inside the chord, a half diminished seventh chord is minor third, major third. I tried to, when we talked about how to spell these types of chords last semester, I think I mentioned this. Right, and if you need to spell a fully diminished seventh chord, it's going to be, the inner intervals are minor third, and minor third, all the way up. Do you find that helpful? This is the half diminished seventh chord. This is the fully diminished seventh. So as long as you can find the root that is scale degree 7 or the leading tone of a key, you should be able to spell any type of diminished seventh chord. Either the half diminished or the fully diminished. Okay, let's do another spelling problem. This one might not be so straightforward, but we can certainly figure it out. I'm going to go to bass clef. And I'm not going to use a key signature. And I want us to spell in the key of F major. I want us to spell that chord right there. And before I put the final notes and the answer on the staff, I would either probably take a piece of scratch staff paper and write it out in root position, or I would write the notes out, the letter names of the notes somewhere on a piece of scratch paper so I get the pitches correct first. And then I would just place it on the staff in the proper inversion. So let's take this in a couple steps. Let's go ahead and spell this as if it were root position. What's the most important pitch is the root. What's the root of a leading tone chord in F?
E.
Okay, E, a half step below. Okay, that's our root. Now we're being asked to spell half diminished. So minor third, major third, if that helps you. E, G, B flat, D. Is that what you got? Okay, those are the right exact pitches, precise pitches we need. And which one of these goes in the bottom for that inversion? The D. Okay. Knowing that observing that we're in the bass clef. D, E, G. How does that look? Why did I have to use an accidental? Well, it's because I don't have a key signature. If I had B flat in the key signature, I would not have to use any accidentals. But I think the author for your workbook assignment says, spell these chords using accidentals, not key signatures. Back to the treble clef. Do another one in a different inversion. This time G minor. Seven fully diminished 6/5. Again, I like to do this in several steps. Be careful about this. What is the root of this leading tone 7th chord in G minor? What? Thank you. It's always a half step below, right? So it's not F. I get a lot of students in my experience that they'll just think, oh, scale degree 7 in this key is F. And then they spell a fully diminished 7th chord on F, and it might be correctly spelled, but the root is wrong to begin with, so it's all wrong. So be careful. Don't rush through that. The root is very important to calculate correctly. F sharp is the true root of this chord. A fully diminished 7th chord, right here, on F is all stacked minor thirds. So F sharp, A, C, E flat. And putting it in first inversion means which of these 4 notes goes on the bottom. The A, first inversion. Okay, so in treble clef, A, C, E flat, F sharp. There you go. That's how you spell that correctly. What about if I did have a key signature? Let's say I had a key signature in this case for G minor. Would I still need an accidental somewhere? Yes, on which note? The root, yeah. I'd have to raise it, raise the leading tone with an accidental. Wow, I've been writing really big. I don't have room for my 4th example, so I'll have to put it over here. One more, and that is the final one inversion that I haven't used yet. Let's try in E minor, a 7 fully diminished for 3. Okay, well, let's channel E minor for a moment in our minds. Let's become one with E minor. The leading tone, T, in E minor, the raised 7th is what pitch for our lead?
D.
D what?
From D sharp.
Yeah, D sharp, right? So the root has to be D sharp, because it's always a half step below. Okay. So the root is not D, just plain D. We got to be careful, or else we'll get the whole spelling chord wrong. It's D sharp. And fully diminished, all minor thirds should give us D sharp, F sharp, A, and C. Those exact pitches. Which one of these 4 goes on the bottom for second inversion? 7. Which one?
A.
The A, that's right. Okay. So here's A, and C, and D sharp, and F sharp. That is my final answer. Okay, let me pause here for a moment. Does anyone have any questions about why these 7th chords are half diminished and fully diminished, or how to spell these chords, or how to find the root? Any question about these chords is a good one right now, if you have one. Because, as your instructor, just like all the instructors here, we want you to understand. We want you to, whatever is best for you. We want the best for you. So we don't want you to be frustrated or in the dark or anything like that. Unless there's a rolling blackout, then you can be in the dark for a little while. Okay, so that's how to spell those chords. Let's move on next to talk about how these, well, we talked about the function of these chords as well, but we haven't really talked about exactly what they go to in a progression. Okay, so maybe I'll use another color for a change. we know that these chords, the half diminished and the fully diminished seventh chord, are dominant in function. Maybe I don't want to use this one, it doesn't look really good. So if it's dominant in function, where do you think a 7-7 chord likes to go? To a tonic chord, right? Namely to 1. And that's true. 7/7s, they like to go to 1. And in major keys, I guess it would look like this. That's their normal resolution. In total harmony, in the progression, 7/7 chords like to go to 1, first and foremost. Now, sometimes they don't get to 1 right away. Sometimes they'll go to actually a stronger dominant chord before then they actually go to 1. Because remember, these are the weakest of the dominant functioning chords. And you can always progress in the same function blocks. You can always progress from weaker to stronger if you use more than one chord in the same function box in a progression. So, if this is the weakest one of the dominant, where could it go to technically before that? Another dominant that's stronger would be 5, that's right. So this is not uncommon. 7/7s can go to the strongest dominant, of course, first, 5, which then goes to 1. You'll see that rather frequently, I guess.
Would it ever go to an 164?
Yes, it can. Yeah, because really that 164 chord, that can really interrupt and come between anything and a 5. So for instance, yeah, this is definitely possible. Yep. As long as though I think you remember that the 7 chord is the weakest of all the dominant chords in that dominant box we learned, then you'll know that it can go to a stronger dominant, either this combination or this one directly before going to 1. But it doesn't have to go to any of these stronger dominants. It can go immediately to 1. Okay, let's see here. Yeah. All right. I want to show you, maybe one measure will do it, maybe a couple measures will do it, but I want to show you one of the reasons why 7 chords have dominant function is because a 7/7 chord shares 3 notes in common with a 5/7 chord. Let me see if I can illustrate it like this. Take a look at those 2 chords. What I put next to each other, adjacent, right side by side, I've taken a 5/7 in first inversion. And I've placed it next to a leading tone 7th chord in group position. How many tones are in common, or shared between those 2 chords? 3 out of the 4. One of which is the leading tone. And of course, a chord cannot have dominant function unless it has the leading tone in it. So really, when you look at this, really a 7 diminished 7th chord is only 1 note different from a 5/7 chord in a particular inversion. In fact, the only different notes are these ones right here. And isn't this note the different note? Isn't it only just a half step away from that one? God, they're so close. They're so close. They function very, very similarly. This one obviously being stronger dominant because it has the dominant pitch. This one is the weaker dominant because it doesn't have the dominant pitch yet. Okay, let's take a look at another pair. What if we take a 5-4-3 chord in this same key of C minor, and we put it right next to a 7-7 in first inversion? Do you see again how 3 notes identical, just 1 note different? But if I put the 5-7 in this inversion next to a 7-7 in a different inversion, they're just about identical in terms of bottom notes, top notes, and all that sort of thing. And then there's one more I'm going to do quickly, and that is I'm going to put the 5-4-2 right next to a 7-4-3 in this key. Again, almost identical, it's just 1 note, a half step apart that's different.
So is this like the weakest harmonic motion you can have?
How do you mean, like?
Like, it's 1 note moving for each chord.
Oh, yeah. Well, you know, you would never go from a stronger dominant to a weaker dominant. It would always be the other way around. But you know, you'll see that, for instance, like you'll see in a progression a 7-4-3, and it'll actually go then to a 5-4-2, which will then, of course, it has to go to a 1-6. But you know, you see this because, well, let me see if I could play that in C minor. Maybe your ear will tell you. Okay, so here's a 7 fully diminished 4-3. Now if I go to a 5-4-2 first, listen to the slight difference. Here's the 7. Here's the 5. It's enough to like feel like, oh yeah, to me it feels like the stronger one, we're really grabbing on to dominant there, which then would go to 1-6. But you do hear that, you know, weaker, slightly stronger, and then 1-6. And all that has to happen is 1 note. In the 7-7 chord, 1 note just goes down by half step, and you've got a 5-7. Okay, so why am I showing you all this? Well, there's a reason I'm taking the time to show you all this. It's because since these chords are so similar and they behave and function so similarly, we can actually include the 7-7 chord and all its inversions in our 5-7 resolution chart. This is kind of what I mean. Going back to last unit, remember how we said that 5-7 goes to something, and 5-6-5 goes to something, and 5-4-3, and then finally 5-4-2? Right? Help me, help me fill this out here. What does 5-7 go to?
1-4-6.
Okay, you want to do this chart in major mode or minor mode?
Major.
Major? Okay, we'll do it in major. So 1 or 6. What about 5-6-5?
It goes to 1.
1. Reposition. You are correct. What about 5-4-3?
1 or 1-6.
1 or 1-6. And finally, 5-4-2 must go to
1-6.
1-6. Okay. Now, I've left a little spacing here because right next to the 5-6-5, I'm going to put a 7 reposition 7. Since they have the same bass note, right? And so we can also say, actually, since I got to do the half diminished version because you told me to do it in the major mode. But what we can do is expand our resolution chart and say, if a 5-6-5 has to go to root position 1 because T, the leading tone, is on the bottom and has to go up, then that's also true of a 7-7 in root position. And T is also on the bottom and in an outer voice, so that would have to go up by half step to build. which would cause this root of this, the bottom of this to be 1 or and next to the 5, 4, 3, I'm going to put the first inversion of the 7, 7. And we're going to say that if a 5, 4, 3 can go to 1 or 1, 6, then so can a 7, 6, 5 chord. And finally, I'm going to put the 7, 4, 3 next to the 5, 5, 4, 2. And we're saying that since a 5, 4, 2 chord has to go to 1, 6, well then a 7, 4, 3 will have to go to 1, 6. And that just leaves off one bass position of the 7, 7. Which one am I missing? The 4, 2, right? And I have a 7, 4, 2. So to this chart, I'm going to add one final row on the bottom. And that's just going to be the 7, 4, 2 by itself. And we'll find out that because the 7th of this chord is in the bass and has to go down by step, that this chord goes either to 1, 6, 4, or 5, 7. You can trust me on that for now. If we have time next class to show an example, or maybe you'll see one on your homework or in the near future, but that's what that goes to. So, what was a resolution chart that just had all the inversions or bass positions of the 5, 7, and what those would have to go to, now we can include all the bass positions of the 7, 7 chord and match them up with different inversions of the 5, 7 and find out that they go to the same thing. And so our resolution chart has become twice as informative now as it was. Is that it? Is this making sense? I hope I haven't lost it. On Monday, what we're going to have to do is talk about how to part write a 7, 7 chord. I know it sounds like, woohoo, I can't wait till Monday, right? No, but I mean, as long as you get the information, the basics about spelling and how the chord functions and what it goes to, that's a big part of it right there. So what I have to do is I have to leave you with an assignment, but it's not on a handout, it's all in the workbook. It's page 123 in the workbook, just selected exercises, you don't have to complete the whole page. Okay, so just pay attention to the assignment sheet for the specific ones I want you to do. And that should be all. So, there we go. Have a good weekend.